We all know, man, that some of the divisions in the UFC are clearly better than others, and today we're going to be talking about it and breaking it down in the form of a tier list. Obviously explains itself. We're going to be ranking these divisions, flyweight all the way through heavyweight. Oh god, wait till we fucking get to heavyweight. Now, I'm not just going to be ranking this off like, oh, it's like the most skilled to the least skilled. That's not how I'm going to be doing it. For sure, how good that the fighters are and the skill sets are going to be an important part of how I'm ranking them, but it's also like, how good is the champion for the division, or just how good is it of a champion to have? How entertaining or quality are these fights that this division's putting on a lot of the time? How is the name value and the star power for the division as a whole? How is the talent and the skill level, like I was saying? How are the matchups and how matchmaking and what you could do with it? So shit like that is what I'm going to be kind of ranking this off of. Just starting off, of course, with the flyweight division. This could be controversial, alright? I'm not trying to be some casual or whatever the fuck, but I'm going to be putting the flyweights in the C tier, and I'm going to explain why, alright? Because I honestly think that the flyweight division as a whole is pretty underrated and deserves more credit, deserves more love, deserves more attention, whatever the fuck, alright? But that's not going to stop me from putting it in the C tier, because listen, although the finishing ability is clearly not there a lot of the time, or although flyweight has, I feel like out of all the divisions, the biggest lack of name value or star power, whatever the fuck, or whatever the hell the problems you want to have with the flyweight division, like, I do think that they get the fuck after it, they put on good scraps, fun fights, and the champion right now is active as fuck and not straying away from all contenders. And then, you know, we got a bunch of new up and coming prospects on the rise. You got like fun matchups kind of throughout. Like, and like I said earlier to start it off, like, the flyweights put on fun fights, and clearly all we're fucking doing here is watching fights. That should be, I feel like, the quality that probably matters the most. Like, how entertaining are the scraps? The flyweights know how to fucking throw sometimes, but I'm putting it in C just because I feel like I was saying, the lack of the name value. Like, in terms of star power or recognitionability, no, I sound retarded. Those were both not words, but I feel like Brandon Moreno is clearly the division's biggest star, and then who's behind that? Like, maybe Pantoja, who is the fucking champion, and then after that, it's just like a battle for third place. Like, don't get me wrong, you have recognizable names like a Brandon Royval, Tatsuro Tairo, Manel Kopp, shit like that, but you gotta think to the general eye, or to the public, or to a lot of casual viewers. They're like, who the fuck is that guy? They really just have no idea when it comes to flyweight, let alone when you get outside the top 10. Like, as much as there's great guys like Charles Johnson or Joshua Van, or even more, like, in terms of the star power or getting attention to the division or drawing in names for fight nights or pay-per-views, like, there's a reason why the flyweights, a lot of them are unknown. Like, it's not just because they're the smaller guys. Like, these guys fight just as much as all the other divisions, if not more, and now they're getting a lot of, especially lately in the past year or two, like, a lot of fight night main events or co-mains or kind of just like feature fight spots. Like, the respect is finally being put on the flyweights, at least from the UFC, or at least, I mean, maybe, who the fuck knows, but there's just not a lot of draw there, whether it be for pay-per-view numbers, or who's gonna click on this video or this interview or watch this fight between these two. Like, most of the time, people are not amped up to see the flyweights more than anything, even though they do put on good fights, they put on good scraps. Another thing that holds them back, and why I can't put them higher than C, is clearly, like I was saying earlier, the lack of finishing ability. There's nothing wrong with having a fighter, or just fighters, like a division like this, where not every performance is going to be a knockout or a submission or some crazy back and forth brawl and 3 knockdowns apiece and whatever the fuck. Like, I'm not asking for just finish. I don't need that shit. But it is an important factor to consider, like, not just for entertainment value, man, but like, it's an important thing. Like, finishes are part of the game, they're part of the fights, and you know, it's kind of a fun aspect to it where you're chomping your fucking nails and you're like, oh, like, I can't anticipate what's gonna happen next because we're one shot away from this guy knocking out the other. But you really don't have that sense of urgency or nail biting with the flyweights, because you know it probably takes, you know, a little bit more than just one shot KO power. I mean, you got what, like guys like Kai Kara France, but other than that, like, and even then, that's Kai Kara France, that's their knockout guy. So it really kind of says it all. Like, the division, as you know, there's amazing strikers in the division, don't get me wrong, like some really talented guys, especially in the upper echelon of the division. I mean, you got Usyk, you got Kopp, you got Moreno, you got Pantoja. Like, there's some good fucking, well, Pantoja's mainly a grappler who has become so well-rounded that, you know, his striking's fucking good. But there's even more, man. Charles Johnson and Joshua Van and Kai Sakura, they know how to fucking throw hands. There's some good strikers in the division, but like, in terms of power, and Kai Kara France as well, he's a good fucking striker, but in terms of the power, like, there's just not a lot from these guys. I mean, take Joshua Van for an example, like, one of the most high volume and high output strikers pound for pound in the UFC right now. And it's not, I mean, he has like 1 knockout, maybe 2 knockouts in the UFC, and he's already been racking up a few fights at this point. So it's like, I feel like that just, you know, love Joshua Van, one of my favorite favorite prospects pound for pound, but I'm using him as an example of someone who gets the fuck after it, puts an overload of volume on guys, but yet just still quite not able to take them out of there. And, you know, that does hold the flyweights back a bit. For as good as some of the fights they have can be, the lack of finishing potential, the lack of star power, and the fact that the division is kind of just now coming into its own over the past couple of years, like, we're finally starting to see, like, the division get a bit deeper, or a lot of new upcoming prospects on the rise, and shit get shaken up, but even with all that being said, like, you could tell that for the flyweights, the talent level and the skill level is still catching up to divisions like Bantamweight, Featherweight, Lightweight, like the lighter weight classes, but they've been around for a lot longer. Not a lot longer, but they've been around longer, and they have more experience, they have more guys, they have more talent, and now, like I said, the division is finally starting to figure itself out, and finally starting to, you know, really crisping up the talent, but at the end of the day, they're still, I feel like, on catch up to the bantamweights, to the featherweights, to the lightweights. Don't get me wrong, the flyweights are fucking skilled. They're fucking good. And again, especially those top 8, top 9 guys. I'm looking at this Tim Elliott shit ranked at number 10. I refuse to include Tim Elliott here when I'm praising the flyweights. But seriously, like, there's some really good or well-rounded or just in general, like, really skillful, quick, precise, really good fighters at flyweight. And I would definitely say that the skills at flyweight are better than someone like a, you know, a light heavyweight or a heavyweight, like the heavier guys. But it's just, even with that being said into account, like, the talent level just isn't the deepest here. There isn't an overload of big names. And when I was talking about the star power thing, I don't even mean that. Like, yes, that's a thing, and it really does rely on, like, the Morenos and Pantosias to kind of carry them in terms of recognizability for a lot of these casuals or to sell shit. But just in general, like, when you have guys like, I mean, when I'm looking at the rankings here, like, Tim Elliott's still ranked number 10, you know? And it's just like Tagiro Lembekov, Charles Johnson, Bruno Silva, Joshua Van, Kai Sakura. These are guys that are ranked like 11 through 15, and granted, they're very fucking good, but when you're comparing it to the 11 through 15 of some of the other divisions, like a welterweight or a lightweight or fucking middleweight, like some shit like that, bantamweight, like, it's, you could tell kind of the difference in skill level. So overall, man, and one more thing I just want to say too, talking about the champion in Pantoja. Pantoja's a good fucking champion, man. Like, listen, I know the guy doesn't have a big personality or really any personality at all, I'm sorry, but he doesn't have some brash personality or knows how to talk his shit or really try and sell a pay-per-view on the mic, nothing like that. But at the end of the day, he's active as fuck, wants to kind of just maintain that activity, and he takes on all fucking contenders. There's a reason why the UFC is scrapping to give him Kai Kara France. It's because he went out there and just dusted a guy who they had to bring in from another organization just because Pantoja was already out of contenders. He whooped him in 2 rounds, and now they're scurrying together because Pantoja wants to fight in April, May, June-ish, but they don't have anybody fucking lined up because he's that active, that dominant, and just, he's not straying away from any fucking contenders, whether it's number 8, Steve Erceg. Hey, you know, I'm doing this for the Kiwis, you know, I'm going to Brazil, going to enemy territory, and I'm going to become the champ. Fuck that shit. We're going all the way up to Brandon Moreno at number 1, or Brandon Royval at number 1. I fucked those 2 up, but Pantoja, whether it's by choice or not, the dude is not straying away from anybody, and he stays active. So I don't think he's necessarily great for the division because, you know, flyweight's running in this problem where Pantoja is just whooping everybody in the top 10. He has a combined record of, I'm blanking, I don't know, some, but he's beaten more than half of the top 10, some of them multiple times, and those somebodies in particular, like Brandon Moreno and Royval, who are really fucking good, so to do that to them is insane. So I don't know, Pantoja, he's good and bad for the division. Like, it's good to have a champion who's active as fuck, wants to remain relevant, puts his words inside of the cage, or I should word it as his actions speak louder than his words. He shows that inside of the cage, not straying away from any contender. Like, I can really respect that about Pantoja, and the guy puts on fun fights. He's had wars, good back and forths, especially in the past couple of years, and I can appreciate that. Flyweight, I'm putting it in the C tier. I think that the guys are very fucking good, but I just think the lack of star power, the lack of finishing ability, and the fact that just we're running into some repetitive matchups towards the upper end of things, like, I think that that's the kind of shit that holds it back. But the flyweights definitely do deserve a lot more respect, but C tier, unfortunately, is where I'm going to have to put them in. So moving on, up next to the bantamweight division. Now, I'm going to be putting the bantamweights, I know a lot of people praise and glaze bantamweights, you know, but I'm going to be putting Merab and the bantamweights in the A tier. All right, that's fucking good. All right, they're one of the best divisions that the UFC has to offer. Like, they put on good scraps. There's a lot of recognizable names. Merab is kind of coming into his own as the champion. We see a lot of guys at bantamweight who are just very fucking skilled, know how to scrap. There's a lot of recognizable names, like I said. So overall, bantamweight bantamweight is going to be going in A. I mean, when you look at just the star power here, you got a Umar Nurmagomedov, you got Corey Sandhagen, Chito Vera, Henry Cejudo, Jose Aldo, Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley, Merab Dvalishvili, and even fucking more. Not only in terms of talent is this division great, but also just, you know, picking up on star power. And I do think it's kind of crazy how there's only a 10 pounds difference between these guys, and you could have everybody shaking up the world and being so fucking excited for like a featured slot of a pay-per-view if it's a bantamweight scrap, like maybe you did like a Sandhagen versus Figgy. But imagine if that was flyweight, it gets so much less respect or attention or whatever the fuck. It's kind of crazy how much 10 pounds can make of that much of a difference. But the bantamweights, man, I'm not putting an S because I do feel like there is a lack of depth when you kind of get outside that top 10, top 15. The guys that are good at bantamweight, they're so fucking good, and even kind of the prospects that are lingering outside the rankings, they're talented, man. Like, bantamweight's a really good division, but it's lacking in the depth and it's lacking in the substance. And I feel like we're at this point where we're kind of relying too much on the big names at bantamweight. Like, I don't know, like, it's not like there's a lot of attention or hype being put into guys like Ayman Sahabi, you know, Kyler Phillips, Marcus McGee, Montel Jackson, and even like the biggest prospect outside the rankings like Peyton Talbot. He just got shut down, unfortunately. So it's like there is a problem where it's starting to come into bantamweight, where it was one of, if not the kind of top division over the past couple of years, right up there with lightweight. But now we're starting to witness kind of a decline. It's like a decline in quality or anything like that, but now we're starting to run into a problem of possibly repetitive matchups. Now we're running into kind of a lack of big prospects on the rise. Like, there really isn't too many outside the, in terms of just the prospects alone. I do want to say this, like, there really isn't that many compared to even a division like flyweight or all the other ones. Like, in terms of the lack of depth of kind of up and coming prospects, you could argue it's up there with fucking light heavyweight and all that bullshit. Well, I'm exaggerating, it's not that bad, but you know what I'm saying. So would like to see a bit more of kind of some refreshing matchups in the division. Would kind of like to see some more prospects, you know. And like, other than that though, the division is fucking great. There's a lot of intriguing things you could do. The champion in Merab is kind of a double-edged sword, because I feel like Merab, you know, really starting to take off in popularity and attention and all that shit. And at least the dude wants to fucking be active and take on all comers. Like, he's already being talked about to face Yan, who, you know, that fight would be going down in May from what the talks are going down. So I respect Merab for being a fucking active champion. You know, won the title at the Sphere in September, or was that September or was that August? It was one of the fucking two. Then turns around and now he's facing everybody and their mom, going up to get this guy at 18 goddamn nations. You might as well put him against, going into that fight against Umar, goes and beats him, close decision, but he gets it done, and now he's already turning it back. So although Merab doesn't have any sort of, you know, kind of aura or stage presence or knows how to talk his shit, at the end of the, and also with the fighting style, listen, I'm cool, Merab. I was rooting for him hard going into that Umar fight. I wanted to see him prove everybody wrong. It's a great story, but at the end, there are some really great scraps that he has had, like the fight with Umar, the fight with Marlon Morales, shit like that. But at the end of the day, Merab, you know, he doesn't talk his shit on the mic. Most of his fights are boring or decisions. Like, the dude can't get a finish for his life. There's just a really big lack of finishing ability with Merab, and the lack of kind of just, I mean, it was a great story and kind of shit talking back and forth between him and Umar, but I feel like that's not really going to happen a lot. Merab just doesn't have a lot of presence as the champion. He's a solid 1.5 for the division because of the activity and because he's willing to take on any fucking contenders, similar to Pantoja, but, you know, again, at least Pantoja's kind of putting on a bit more awards, gets a bit more finishes, sit like that. So I feel like Merab kind of a double-edged sword for the division. I feel like a guy like, you know, there are other guys that I feel like could be better to represent the division, but at the end of the day, Merab is just so fucking good. He's clearly earned that spot, and he is the bantamweight GOAT. So, bantamweight, man, it does so many things right. I don't think it puts on as many bangers. Maybe it's like a division like lightweight or shit like that, but it's so fucking stacked. I do think a bit overhyped in some regards. That's why I'm not putting it in S, but at the end of the day, it's one of the best of the divisions, one of the best divisions that the UFC has to offer, and it's got a lot going on. Just a little bit of lack of depth, and we're starting to run into a repetitive problem here, and just sometimes the bantamweights aren't putting on like the craziest wars comparatively to other divisions, you know what I mean? So overall, it's a fantastic division, but just a few problems kind of hidden without it. So moving on, up next to the featherweight division here. Now, featherweight, I'm gonna be putting it in B. Now, I have reasonings for this, but I do want to say, let's just get the glaze out of the way first, all right? Like, featherweight is really fucking good in terms of the skills. Like, it's one of the most skillful divisions that the UFC has to fucking offer. And it's led by a champion who, pound for pound, is one of the best the UFC has to offer. Featherweight's just full of guys who are very well-rounded. It has its fair share of good strikers, but it's also got its fair share of good wrestlers. It has its fair share of well-rounded guys. So Featherweight kind of does it all in that regard. In terms of just the skills and just the talents and what these guys bring inside the cage, sometimes it's not always the most entertaining fights in the world, but a lot of the time they're fucking bangers. And it kind of transitions really well in between lightweight. Like, you see a lot of featherweights move up or translate their skill set up very well to lightweight, and I think that just goes to show how good the featherweight division is. Like, we've seen it with guys who have fought at featherweight before, but now they moved up, whether it be full-time or just part-time. Like, yeah, for part-time, the example being like, a Holloway going against a Gaethje or Poirier, or Volkanovski going against Makhachev, shit like that. But we've also seen guys who kind of struggled at featherweight, but then when they made that full move up to lightweight, they started doing fucking wonders. I mean, one example being Charles Oliveira. So I feel like everyone acts like there's some massive skill difference in between the lightweights and the featherweights, but it's simply not true. Like, featherweights usually translate very well up to lightweight, and I think that just goes to show how good they are. So just in terms of the skills, this division is a fucking S tier. They're amazing fighters. But why I'm putting this in B, all right, and not S or A? It's simply because I feel like featherweight is kind of it's definitely a fun division. Don't get me wrong. Like, B tier is a good tier, but I feel like it's just one of the more less fun divisions, if that makes sense. And I think that just goes into kind of a lot of inactivity that goes on with featherweight. And especially for that kind of upper echelon of the division, the inactivity holds it back. There really isn't any big personalities besides like a Volk or Topuria, shit like that, like at featherweight. So there's not a lot of shit talkers or personalities. And in terms of one more thing, I was talking about the glazing, but I do want to add this in. Featherweight has a shit ton of prospects. There's a lot of them on the rise. It's really exciting to see where the division's going to go. It's just a little side note right there. But going back to the problems with featherweight, like I was saying, like the inactivity from some of these guys is fucking crazy. Like, you have Lopez is active as fuck, so he's there, but then you have guys like Yair Rodriguez who fights once a year, and then you have guys like Brian Ortega who fights once a year, Josh Emmett who's been gone for over a year, Calvin Kattar who takes like year breaks in between as well. Like, there's just a lot of guys that are clinging on to that top 10 spot that really just aren't fighting a lot. You know what I mean? Now, don't get me wrong, there's the exceptions. You do have the Arnold Allen, and you do have the Diego Lopez's and shit like that, guys who remain relatively active. But I feel like that definitely is a problem for the division. Like, when you have a lot of guys who there could be value for name, or there could be potential for name value there, but they just don't fight, that's a real thing, When it comes to the champion itself, like, Topuria is one of the best champions that the UFC fucking has, man. Like, he knows how to talk his shit on the mic, puts on exciting fights, he's extremely well-rounded, very fucking skillful. It's everything you want in a champion, but when you have a lot of the guys in the rankings that just don't fight or they're inactive, it does hold it back. It loses a lot of the parts that make it intriguing when you're matchmaking or thinking about what's next. Like, you just don't know when half these fuckers are gonna fight. So the inactivity and the lack of, personality are the things that are the reasons why I'm not putting featherweight in S or A. The inactivity, the lack of star power, the lack of just kind of interest outside the cage. But other than that, like, when it comes to just the skill set, the featherweights are very fucking good, very good fighters, and also they could put on some really fun scraps at times. So there's a lot that you could do with the division. There's a lot of potential. It's just, I'm putting it in B because there are those things that really just kind of hold it back. It really is its own worst enemy. It's kind of shooting itself in the foot here. It definitely has a lot of potential. And again, the guys are really fucking good, but it's just, I feel like not enough to put up to S and A in my opinion. I apologize. But moving on, up next to the lightweight division here. Now listen, man, this one is tough because I don't want to be that guy that just glazes lightweight. All right, I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, lightweight, S tier, it's above all, it's the best fucking division, no argument, go argue with the wall. I don't want to fucking be that guy, all right? Because it's weird. I think that lightweight is overrated, but also I'm gonna be putting it in the S tier. I'm fucking sorry, all right? I have my reasonings. Like, I really didn't want to be that guy, bro. I really didn't want to fucking be that guy. But when I'm looking at just how entertaining the fights are, when I'm looking at how good the champion is, when I'm looking at the amount of name value and star power, like when I'm looking at the skill level and how much you could do with the division, like, it really, I feel like, just deserves that S tier. I mean, look at some of the greatest fights of the year nominees that we had for last year. We had Ribovics versus Selhuber, lightweight. We had Orabai versus Rebecki, that was lightweight. We had Makhachev versus Poirier, that was the title fight for lightweight. You had Holloway versus Gaethje, lightweight. Like, a lot of the fights that some of us refer to as the best of the year all come from the same fucking weight class. And when you look at some of the UFC's biggest stars, like you have, let me read this shit. We got Makhachev, Oliveira, Gaethje, Poirier, Holloway, Hooker, Chandler, Moicano, Pimblett. Holy fuck, like, I'm just saying, man, like, the star power and the name value is strongest at lightweight, I feel like. Out of any of the UFC's divisions here, the lightweights are definitely packing the most star power. And like I was saying, like, they put on really fun fights. Like, the BMF title is gonna be lingering around this division for a while, I feel like, now that Holloway has moved in here, because you pull some fucking names out of a hat and all of a sudden that's the BMF title, and it's like, all right, I'm fine with that, you know what I mean? So the lightweights, they put on amazing scraps. There's a lot of name value and star power. The champion in Islam Makhachev is a guy who, you know, not the craziest or most exciting personality, but he's a champion that has a lot of respect from the fans. He, you know, is at least trying to be active. I know that last year he only fought one time, but I think we're going to see him fight this year 2 or 3 times, to be honest. Probably another in like International Fight Week around then, and then maybe he'll close it off the year. Maybe like November, December, maybe next January, something like that. So I think Makhachev we're going to see fight 2 or 3 times this year. But even before last year, man, like the title run of Islam Makhachev has been a good one. Like he's fighting a lot of kind of different kinds of guys, which is kind of nice to see. You know, he's fought Volkanovski, he's fought Oliveira, he's fought Poirier, and then even before the title run, like he kind of had to face, you know, hey, big bad Bobby Green, you know what I mean? But either way, Makhachev is a guy who is building up a really fucking good resume. He just became the lightweight GOAT. I'm hoping that we get to see a bit more activity this year. I feel like he's been putting on fun fights and getting a good finishes like in his time as champion. Now I feel like a bit of a decision merchant and a bit of a kind of just a smudge before the title run started, but once he started getting those title eliminators and then finally won the belt and now he's just taking off with it, like the dude has been putting on an entertaining title run. I'm not talking like Charles Oliveira prime status. That was once in a lifetime shit. Cena versus Rock, he just had to fucking be there. But Makhachev as champion is good for the division. He's got a whole fucking nation, a whole fucking unit behind him. He's chasing GOAT status. I'm not talking lightweight GOAT status because he just fucking achieved that. Like, he's chasing GOAT status, and it's a real possibility that in the next like 3 or 4 or 5, whatever the fuck amount of fights, like he could be the GOAT of the sport. It's pretty insane. We're witnessing history. He's a great champion to have for the division. Just wish we could have saw a little bit more activity last year, but I know he was injured and all that bullshit. But Islam Makhachev's a guy who's really clearing out the division and cleaning it out, and he's one of the ones that really does definitively deserve double champ status. So he's great for the division. It's a good champion to have. And just on top of that, man, like the division just has a lot of intriguing things you could do with it. A lot of good matchups, a lot of good prospects on the rise. You got Joel Alvarez, Grant Dawson, Faraz Siam. Like there's a lot more as well. Like it's filled to the brim at the rankings and inside and out. So lightweight's fucking good, man. Star power, really fun fights, a good champion, and a lot you could do with the division. So I didn't want to put in an S, man. I wanted to be different here. I wanted to be trying something, but I am going to be putting in an S. I can understand a lot of the arguments for it being overhyped or it being not worth it or whatever the fuck or blah blah, it's overrated. I totally understand that. I think it's fucking valid, alright? But I'm going to be standing my base here and I'm going to be putting it in the S tier. So moving on, up next to the welterweight division, headlined by the champ, Belal Muhammad. Hey, you know, you better not be putting me in the D tier. You know, I'm the real champ. I'm the next GSP. I'm going to be taking out Shavkat and JDM. These guys are bumps. They got nothing on me. I'm going to be putting welterweight in the A tier. Now, if this was a couple years ago, it'd probably be a little bit lower because it had the same problem that Featherweight had, like where a lot of the guys in the division weren't really fighting, or there was potential for name value, but it's just a lot of them maybe too much of decision merchants, or again, nothing really going on the mic or shit like that. But it's like welterweight has really been stepping up within the past year, and I think it's because just the new generation, the new wave has finally taken over for the UFC as a whole. But I honestly feel like with welterweight, you're seeing it a lot more than a lot of the other divisions. Like at this point, the prospects have just fully taken over the rankings. You got the unks like Colby Covington, Wonderboy, Usman, Moore. Like they're slowly just making their way down the rankings or out of them completely. And now it's just filled to the fucking brim with just new up and comers. Like you got Shavkat Rakhmonov, you got Jack Della Maddalena, you got Sean Brady, Buckley, Gary, Michael Morales, and then there's even guys like Jeff Neal, who I wouldn't really call him an unk, but like it's something new for the division. It's something refreshing. These guys are active too. Like they all are young and hungry and have points to prove. So they're trying to get the fuck after it. There's a lot of interesting things you could do at welterweight, a lot of different kind of matchups you can make. I feel like it's a problem that some of the other divisions have where it's like very set in stone matchups, but like with welterweight you could really fucking have some fun with it and mix it up. Like I feel like it definitely is one of the best things it has going for it. It's a lot of young, hungry guys who all want the fucking title. They all want to be the UFC's next big thing, and they're fighting over it, so I can appreciate that. And also, the welterweights, man, they put on some fun scraps. I know that there's some more exciting fighters than others in the division, but at the end of the day, a lot of them know how to stand and bang. A lot of them can put on good fights, good wars, and the finishing ability, the finishing potential, it is there for a lot of these guys. So welterweight, I'm going to be putting it in the A tier. It doesn't have the most, like, bold personalities or anything like that, but these guys know how to fucking scrap. It's got its fair share of wrestlers, it's got a fair share of strikers, it's got its fair share of powerhouses, you know, but also has a lot of well-rounded guys. It's right up there with lightweight and featherweight for being just some of the most, or one of the most skillful and deep divisions. And also, like I keep saying for these, like the prospects, man, they've already taken over the rankings, but there's so many more outside of it too, so there's so much potential for this division. Feeling more than any of the other ones, it's definitely turning into the new generation the most, but it has a lot fucking going for it, man. There's a lot of good to it. Put on fun fights. There's a lot of recognizability there. Again, I don't know if that's a fucking word, but there's a lot of recognizable names in the rankings, and the unks are kind of slowly making their way out, you know, with all due respect to the Usmans and the Burns and all that shit. But so overall, I'm going to be putting welterweight in the A tier. So moving on, up next to the middleweight division here. So it's really weird with middleweight because I feel like a lot of people could argue S, a lot of them could argue A, a lot could argue B, C, or D, to be honest. This is kind of the tweener. It's kind of a matter of opinion. I feel like, well, they all are. Fuck. But I'm just saying, more so than all the other ones, I feel like it's very subjective of what the fuck do you want to do with middleweight. But me personally, I'm really stuck between A or B. So I'm just going to put it in B to kind of make A a bit more elite, I guess. But I'm really kind of stuck in between. But yeah, I'm going to put middleweights in B. Listen, the champion Dricus du Plessis is an amazing champion to have for the fucking division. He's a guy who wants to be active. He's always hunting for the finish, whether it's in the first round or the fifth. He's very well rounded, knows how to talk his shit, like literally build up a fight. He's making two men cry, two of the toughest motherfuckers on the entire earth, making them cry in the fight week build up. So Dricus is a goddamn bully inside the cage and out, but he's a great champ to have for the division, getting pretty close honestly to like Adesanya and Silva status as well. But just in general, for the rest of the middleweights, man, like sometimes there's some really good middleweight scraps in terms of the fights they put on, and sometimes there's some fucking duds. You know, we do have some kind of not so exciting fighters in here. Like you do have the Marvin Vittoris, the Roman Dolidze's, even like Apollo Costa, you know, Sean Strickland. Here's the fucking thing, you guys, you better not put me with the rest of those goddamn boring cans. But seriously, man, like while it is exciting to have guys like Chimaev, well, he fights once every fucking year, so that's unfortunate, but it's exciting to have guys like Baralho and Imavov, Fluffy Hernandez, like Roman Kopylov. There's guys in the rankings that know how to fucking scrap. But honestly, man, yeah, the fights are kind of just hit or miss. Kind of just depends on what you're dealing with in there. The middleweights know how to put on bangers, but at the same time, some of them can be duds. It is what it is. Kind of neutral in that regard. I mean, obviously, these are bigger guys as well, so the shots kind of mean a lot more. Like, there's a lot more pop behind the shots. For some of these guys, man, like, the power is clearly there, you know? These are 185ers. These motherfuckers are all walking around over 200 for the most part. I want to say this as well, in terms of the star power and the name value, there is a lot at middleweight. I mean, you have Adesanya, you have Whitaker. I know those two are on their way out, but still, like, you got Strickland, you got Chimaev, you got DDP, Jared Cannonier, shit like that. So, and even Apollo Costa. So there are recognizable names. There's a lot of name value and star power for the division, but just kind of getting outside the top 10 to 15, there's a solid amount of prospects. There's nothing too promising or anything like that. It's kind of ridiculous how they put Bo Nickel in the rankings over RoboCop. I know he just lost, but I feel like he'd still be worthy to be above Bo Nickel, RoboCop, or fucking Rainier de Ritter even. So it's very bizarre how that's a thing, but I don't know, man. I just don't, it's very weird with middleweight. Like, I don't have any clear reasons for not putting it in A, but I'm just very stuck in the middle between A and B because I feel like there's just something missing from middleweight, but I just can't put my fucking fingers on it right now. Maybe it's a bit of repetitiveness. Maybe there's just, we need new matchups, or the division gets shaken up a bit, or I mean, literally, we got fucking Vittori versus Dolidze, the rematch, to headline another Apex card coming up, dude. Like, if that doesn't just scream Apex main event more than anything else, I don't know what fucking does. It's one of the most pointless rematches ever. But while there are young up-and-coming talents like a Fluffy Hernandez who are going to shake things up, that's exciting. And other guys, of course, like the division, man, is very good. Maybe it's because I feel like it's one of maybe the lesser skilled divisions, but even then, like, these middleweights are really fucking good. But I don't know. Maybe that's just someone that's kind of holding it back for me. I don't know. There's just a couple things that are like holding me back. It just doesn't feel right. So, and B tier's a good tier, all right? I have a lot of good things I'm saying about the middleweights for a good reason. So I'm putting these guys guys in the B tier. There's a lot of name value, star power, finishing ability, but I feel like it kind of suffers from maybe a lack of skill at certain times, or a bit of boring performances, or a bit of repetitiveness. Sorry, I don't even fucking know, man. My logic is not making sense here. It's like I'm trying to convince myself, dude, but whatever. We're gonna make A more elite, the A tier more elite, you know what I'm saying, and we're gonna put we're gonna put the middleweights in the B tier. So moving on up next to the light heavyweight division. You're going in D, boys. All right, you're going in D, because light heavyweight, man, it is just one of the most lackluster divisions that the UFC's got going on right now. Heavyweight is going to be even worse. I'm just giving you all that spoiler. But the light heavyweights, man, a lot of the time, in terms of the fight quality, it's just not there. Like, you're excited when going into a light heavyweight fight at the thought of the finish, or the hardest hitting motherfuckers, or at least some of them. Like, the lightweights know how to fucking stand and bang. They have a lot of power behind those hands. If they get some of the most brutal finishes, dude, they know how to get the fuck after it. Trust, it's there. But just in general, like, when it comes to the quality of fights, you're never really seeing, besides like the occasional like Teixeira versus Prochazka. It's one of the most amazing fights of all time. Or a Cormier versus Gustafsson, or shit like that. Like, there are potential for some really good scraps at light heavyweight. Even one recently, like Pereira versus Roundtree Jr. Like, that's an amazing fight. Don't get me wrong, there are these exceptions and outliers, but I feel like, I'm going to name them. Like, any Prochazka fight, any Yuri Prochazka fight, so don't get me wrong, there's their fair share of bangers for the division. But just in general, man, when you're looking at just the quality of fights, not only in terms of the skill set is light heavyweight on the lesser end of things for the UFC, but also just entertainment-wise, if this is going to a decision and it's a light heavyweight battle, man, a lot of the times it's not the best fight in the world when you're watching it as a fan. You know what I mean? The finishes, they're brutal, they're nasty, they're incredible. There's a lot of powerful guys up here. But when it comes to just the skill set or putting on really fun back and forths, there's not a lot of it. Besides those rare exceptions, I feel like at light heavyweight, you know what I mean? In terms of the star power and name value as well, like, besides Pereira, there's really not much. You have Big Ank and Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill, they're solid names, but it's like there's not really lines going out the fucking stadium door all the way to a local KFC just to sign up for, Khalil Roundtree fight night or some shit like that. You know what I mean? There's good guys in this division. Don't get me wrong. There's a guy like Nikita Krylov, Carlos Olberg, Magomed Ankalaev, and many more. Like, there are some really skillful guys or well-rounded guys, whatever the fuck. Well, I just shouldn't even say well-rounded, to be honest with you, because light heavyweight is one of the most just primarily striker-based divisions that the UFC has to offer. You could argue that there's more wrestlers at fucking heavyweight, for Christ's sake, than light heavyweight. Like, you have Magomed Ankalaev, who's kind of like their most well-rounded guy. You have guys like Blachowicz and Prochazka who are solidly well-rounded, but they want to just kind of stand and bang for the most part. Other than that, it's a division full of strikers, and a Krylov as well, who knows how to mix it up and is well-rounded. But like, this is a division filled to the brim with strikers, guys who purely just want to stand and bang. Pretty much the entire rankings, or a lot of the prospects outside of it. And also, side note right there, like, light heavyweight is really lacking in the prospect department. They're really relying on like a Carlos Olberg, who's kind of already made his way up to the top 6 or 7. Other than that, like, not a lot of potential for things to look forward to in the next couple of years from light heavyweight. But getting back to my whole point about like the well-rounded side of things, like, there really isn't that many besides like a Big Ank or a Blachowicz or a Prochazka, you know what I mean? And those are literally, I didn't even realize I'm saying this, but they're the top 3 fucking contenders behind the champions. There's a reason why they're that fucking good. And like, you would think that just having a division full of strikers on paper, no pun intended that Anthony Smith's in this fucking division, but you would think that that would be a dream, and what more could you ask? That'd be amazing, right? But like, there's just, no, not really, Overall, light heavyweight, I'm putting it in D. There's just, the things that are good about light heavyweight, they're good. The occasional back and forth war. Pereira is an amazing champion to have for the division. He's active as fuck and builds up an insane highlight reel. He's chasing top 5 fighter of all time status. So Pereira's a great champion to have for the division. But just, there's a lot not going for this. Like, there's not a lot to look forward to in terms of just making matchups or recognizing star power and name value. Barely any prospects or kind of interesting things going on for the next couple of years. The fights, while the finishes are really good, they're just not great fights a lot of the time. So, you're on the edge of your seat because you're wondering, when's this motherfucker gonna knock out the other one? But like, when these fights are going to a decision, a lot of the time, man, they are duds. And I don't know. Like, there's just a lot of things that are lacking for the light heavyweight division. A lot of lackluster things or kind of just disappointing aspects to it, man. But there's just so much holding it back. So I'm going to be putting it in the D tier. And it's not going to get lonely because moving on up next to the heavyweight division. This, in my opinion, is just the worst division in the UFC. I'm not even talking for one thing specifically. Like, for me, it's just the least enjoyable division. And I know that's tough to say because you have like a guy like Tom Aspinall, who I'm a huge fan of, and he's fucking explosive, relentless, very entertaining. And the heavyweights as a whole, like, you're like, oh, like, how can heavyweight be the worst division? Like, you never know what's gonna happen. Like, there's a brutal, fucking disgusting knockouts. And that aspect, don't get me wrong, it's fun as fuck. Like, we all watch heavyweight, I feel like, for the same thing, man. Like, you want to see the standing and banging, and eventually, like, you know, these guys are gonna knock each other out. But man, even with that kept into account, like, this is just the nightmare division of the UFC, to be honest. And it makes it even worse when you have guys like John Jones, who, it's just, I just want to say this, man, John Jones is fucking terrible for the heavyweight division. All right, say whatever you want about him being this or him being that. Like, at the end of the day, the motherfucker is sadly the GOAT of the sport. I can't deny that. But what I will deny is him being fucking good for the heavyweights, man. Because you have a guy like Tom who could genuinely be making the heavyweight division more interesting by him just being active and just being the guy that has that undisputed strap. Like, the guy is the shortest average fight time in UFC history. Like, he's already knocked out or finished like over half of the top 10. That would be a guy who is fucking perfect for the division. He wants to be active, starting to get a lot more confident on the mic, shit like that. I kind of like his humble personality though, brother. Like, I'm a huge Aspinall fan, but like, having a guy like that as champ would be exactly what the heavyweight division needs. But no, you're stuck here with fucking John Jones, and he's fighting every other year, and he puts on decisions, or does most of the time. I know not at heavyweight, but it's like, Jesus Christ, go cry about it, you know? So Jones being the champion is actively just holding the division back. Like, when you can't shoot for a title shot, or you have to like worry about what's just going down next with Jones and Aspinall. Jones Aspinall is an amazing fight, and hopefully we get to see it. I would absolutely love that, but just John Jones being the champion, man, it's holding everything back. It's not giving a lot of time for contenders to fucking breathe here, or for Aspinall to really rack up some good title defenses. Like, John Jones is just preventing all of that. Like, you need to have an active champion, man. So yeah, the points made there. I think Jones is terrible for the fucking division, but when we're just getting outside of that, like, the problems with heavyweight, man, it's just one of the most talentless divisions in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, the guys that are good at heavyweight are really fucking good. Like, these guys are elite fighters for a reason. They completely deserve that spot in the rankings or whatever the fuck it is, but you got half these guys in the heavyweight division. Now, granted, I just saw a post the other day and it was saying that heavyweight has like the least amount of talent on the roster. It only has like 30 guys total. There's only 30 fucking heavyweights here, so they're not working with a lot. Half these guys look and act like they just were randomly picked out of a hat at a local KFC parking lot, but it's like the top 5 guys like Gane, Volkov, Pavlovich, Blades, Aspinall, and Jones. Even Jelno made it in there. Like, those guys are very fucking good, very elite. A lot of them are well-rounded, and or even the ones that aren't, like, what they do well, they do fucking very well. But then you just have everything outside of that. Like, it's just very shallow. There's not a lot of talent here. There's one prospect at fucking best. I mean, maybe 2. All right, Mick Parkin and Cortez Acosta. Like, that's what heavyweight has going for it for the future. It's fucking sad, man. Don't get me wrong. There's guys like Kennedy Nzechukwu and all that kind of bullshit. Blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of light heavyweights that just should move up to heavyweight. It'd not only be good for the division as a whole, makes it a bit deeper, but also I feel like a lot of those light heavyweights would do very well. But now I'm getting besides the point here. But just in general, man, like, the lack of talent at heavyweight is a real fucking thing. Like, there's just not a lot going for it besides the top 5 or 6. Like, once you get to like Spivak and Tybura running back for the 18th time as an Apex main eventer, because they just keep beating all the other guys that are coming up right now, or just those other guys like 10 through 15. It's fucking unfortunate, man. Like, Tai Tuivasa, y'all, is still in the fucking top 10. Tai Tuivasa is still in the top 10. He's 0-5 in his last 5, dude. Just the division as a whole, man. It's very unfortunate. You know, we could say whatever. You got the little things going for it, like the way we could joke about a fucking Shamil Gaziev, or the fact that Tom Aspinall is a guy who is fucking amazing, or shit like that. But as a whole, this division is just completely lacking in depth, lacking in talent, lacking in name value. A lot of these guys are inactive too, which does hurt it. Like, they kind of only fight once or twice a year, which again, it's just unfortunate, man. And don't get me wrong, like, the heavyweight knockouts are some of the most fun. It's one of the most fun aspects of the sport as a whole. Like, we all love to see the heavyweights stand and bang and shake up the fucking cage, rumble the arena, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I sound like a white mother here, but dude, heavyweight fights for the most part, are not good fights. Like, besides those finishes or the moments of anticipation where you're waiting for that, like, dude, the heavyweights, when these guys are going to a decision, a lot of the time it's a blob fest, or it's fucking boring, man. Like, or they're just avoiding all of each other's biggest moments or shit like that. A lot of heavyweight decisions, most of them are a bit of duds, man, and it's unfortunate. So there's just a lack of name value here. There's a lack of skills. There's a lack of prospect, a lack of depth. There's a champion that is just terrible for the division and for the UFC. Like, there's not a lot going for heavyweight. Like, the knockouts are great, and the guys that are good are very fucking good, but it's only a select few of them, man. Or just these very certain things you got to kind of search for or look for when picking out the best parts of the division. So it's unfortunate. I don't know if I said this already, but it's going in D tier. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this video here. It was a fucking long one on accident. I really thought I was gonna make this shit like 20 minutes. It's fucking close to an hour. God, I'm a yapper, y'all. I'm a fucking yapper. I'm sorry. So thank you guys so very much for making it this far in the video. I really appreciate it. So thank you so very much for giving me y'all's time and attention. And also, if you're able to help me get to 1,000 subscribers, clicking that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it, man. But regardless, thanks for making it this far. Appreciate y'all a lot. All the smoke MMA. We got a really fun fight card coming this weekend. The UFC's been trying its best to fucking revive it, save it a bit. So we're all looking forward to that. Let me know your opinions in the comments below. What were the divisions that you agree with me on, disagree with me on? What divisions would you have higher, lower? What are some of your favorites, least favorites? Let me know in the comments below. So all the smoke MMA. Appreciate you all a lot, and I'll see you all next time.